And what if I told you that besides the end and the nether, dimensions we already know, there's actually a third one, completely secret, that stayed hidden for almost 10 years. And no, we're still not talking about the Aether. Today, we're going to talk about the so-called Phantom Dimension, a strange, silent place that made a lot of people need a change of pants after stumbling upon it for the first time. And to understand where all of this came from, obviously we need to start from the beginning. The person who made this story popular was the YouTuber Miran Uriel, messing around with version 1.12 of Minecraft Java, the one that a lot of people consider to be the last great classic phase of the game. It was released before the aquatic update, emphasizing colors, building, and stability. Thanks to this practical focus, it's still a top choice for modders. And ironically, it was right there that something appeared that no one remembered seeing before. What he found wasn't a dimension in the traditional sense. Additionally, there's no new menu, it doesn't show up as a separate option, and it also doesn't create a different folder inside the world. What happens is a heavy conflict during loading. The game handles significant lag and multiple dimensions simultaneously. The end, overworld, and even the nether end up being counted as if Minecraft was trying to organize 3 thoughts at the same time and froze in the middle of the sentence. The difference is that when it freezes, you're still inside. That's what Miran realized by testing specific combinations involving the end portal, and I have no idea how many times he tested it until he found the result. What we know is that the most well-known method starts in the most common way possible, defeating the Ender Dragon, unlocking the central portal, and returning to the overworld. The difference is in what comes next. Before entering the portal again, he builds a specific structure. 2 glowstones with a 1-block gap between them, an iron block on top, and redstone toggling the setup on and off to create that intentional lag that makes any PC take a deep breath. And the most important detail, entering the portal sideways, touching the edge, instead of going straight through like everyone has done since 2012. When you do this, the game starts to behave in a strange way. The screen freezes for a moment, giving you that feeling that it's going to close by itself, but it doesn't. You press ESC and the menu opens normally, but when you go back to the world, it's not fully loaded. On the contrary, the interface looks confusing, the chunks take a long time to load, and it feels like you're falling endlessly through the void. And that's when the last step comes in, teleporting to a distant coordinate, something far away from the default spawn, usually thousands of blocks in any direction. And when you show up there, the scenery doesn't match what should be there. It looks familiar, but at the same time, it's out of place, as if the world is trying to remember which dimension you should be seeing. And that's exactly where what the community started calling the ghost dimension begins. The chunks just don't load properly. The world appears half-loaded. Strange structures show up on the horizon and disappear when you move around. Parts of the ground look solid, but they're not rendering properly, and sometimes you're literally walking on invisible blocks. It's not your usual server lag. It's like the scenery is being built as you look at it. If you check F3, sometimes the biome displays as ocean, even though you're clearly standing on an area that looks like the end but with incorrect blocks. The sky, the lighting, and the void look like the end, but the game insists that it's the overworld, and the elements that appear really are from there. It's like it's trying to render the end using information from the normal world. One layer on top of the other, neither one completely consistent. The soundtrack joins in as well, and maybe it's the creepiest part. The music starts playing and suddenly gets stuck in the middle of a note. Sometimes it even gets stretched like someone is dragging the audio in an editor. At other times it just stops and comes back seconds later, out of sync, kind of distorted. This happens because the game thinks it's switching dimensions, but the switch never fully completes. The audio event gets stuck in limbo, just like you. Interaction with the world also starts behaving strangely. When you right-click and place the blocks, they just disappear. They don't break normally, don't drop items, and make no sound. Pressing Q to throw something may not work. It's like the game loses the link between you, your inventory, and the world. You're present, but the rules fail. Many people also notice an interesting detail when testing it. Several blocks seem to appear in a rough 16 by 16 pattern, as if the world were being shown only on the basic chunk grid. Minecraft uses this grid internally, but usually smooths it out with layers, lighting, and generation logic. There, it's like seeing the system's skeleton without makeup. If the first method already overwhelms the game, the second one simply overloads it with even more information. This Rails method is the most chaotic way to access the Phantom Dimension. The idea starts in the end itself. You go to the spawn area, that point where everyone reappears after entering for the first time, and start covering everything with rails. Regular rails, activator rails, powered rails, the whole package. It's not just a few pieces scattered around. The floor is so full it looks like you're building a 2014 server's central station. The key is to keep everything on, powered with redstone, flashing and updating the block every tick. Then, return to the overworld and repeat the first method's steps. Place iron blocks on the end portal and stand to the side to enter. When you go through the portal under these conditions, the game has to deal with an area that's absurdly full of blocks constantly updating while it's also switching dimensions. That's when it starts to lag. The screen freezes for a few seconds, the world seems uncertain, and that's when you should press ESC before your instinct tells you to close everything. When you return to the world, it loads in completely, even more unstable than before. Ultimately, the result is the same concept as the first method but intensified. You don't enter something new in the traditional sense, you enter a state where Minecraft has clearly lost control of its own organization. And if you thought filling the end with rails was already over the top, wait until you see the third method. This is the kind of thing that makes anyone wonder who was the jobless enemy of TLT who had enough free time to test this. Now the setting is the Nether. Inside, build a specific area of 23 by 20 blocks. This is the exact measurement, not random or approximate. You then set up the end portal inside, place gold blocks on the structure, and enter. The ritual is already strange, almost like the one to summon Herobrine, but the key moment is the transition. Once the game starts switching dimensions, press ESC again to interrupt loading, then comes the final, even more absurd step. You use TP to extremely high coordinates, something like 90,000, 90,000, 0, throwing your character far enough away that the world needs to recalculate almost everything around you. When the screen stabilizes, it shows a scene resembling the Nether, though some areas remind you of the end, the void, and the unusual lighting. Other parts have the texture and behavior of the overworld. In the end, it's as if the three dimensions were stacked into a single layer and no one decided which one should win. This is where the strangest interactions begin. In some tests, when you right-click on blocks, they simply turn into gold. Vina Ven Extreme's Paradise. They don't break, don't drop, and don't make any sound. They turn into gold as if you suddenly got the Midas touch. At other times, the last block you held seems to determine what will replace the existing block. You set something down, but instead of filling a gap, it replaces the block beneath it. It's an odd mix of feeling powerful and out of control. You interact with the environment and it responds, but incorrectly. The game continues, but the rules seem different. And when you look at the whole thing, you realize that this hybrid version is the most unstable of all, and it's not just the world loading halfway. It's as if Minecraft's internal layers had been scrambled and you were walking on top of that scramble. But this isn't the first time we've heard reports of alternate dimensions within the game. The difference here is that it's true. Numerous viral TikTok and YouTube videos discuss the so-called lost dimension, but from a much more haunted, horror-focused perspective, already creating lore as if it were a lost part of the game where Herobrine, Entity 303, or anything else was lost and locked away for almost 10 years. When you stop to think about it, it's really bizarre, since version 1.12 is from 2017, so it took 10 years of unemployment for us to finally discover this so-called phantom dimension. Even before it surfaced, Minecraft conditioned the community to believe there was always something hidden beyond the start screen, and this idea wasn't just from forum theories. Many of these stories had real origins, like an old Notch comment, a leaked image, a strange bug, or a convincing mod that seemed like official content. The game has always carried this atmosphere of silent mystery, as if there was more there than the menu let on, and the community never stopped exploring that. And before talking about these stories, fair warning, I might touch on a sensitive point: the biggest disappointment in the life of any Minecraft player a decade ago. Undoubtedly, the biggest example of theories about a new dimension is the Aether, which became almost a collective obsession between 2010 and 2011 when a lot of people swore you could open a portal to the sky using glowstone and pouring water in the middle. It's a simple recipe, almost innocent, but the promise was huge. It wasn't about the Nether or the end, but a cloud dimension with new biomes, mobs, objectives, and something entirely different from the rest of the game. In vanilla, that never worked, but the situation changed when the Aether mods created by King B-Dogs appeared, who years later ended up becoming an official developer at Mojang, and at the time I even posted the video "Finally the Aether," a detail that only fueled the theories even more. The mod didn't seem improvised. It had floating islands everywhere, unique mobs, huge golden dungeons, its own bosses, exclusive armor, and even a slightly different physics that gave a feeling of lightness, as if the character was really walking in another realm. And the portal was exactly what the legend said: glowstone with water in the middle to activate it, which for many people sounded like a silent confirmation that the idea existed from the beginning and had been removed from the game at some point. When Minecraft was rapidly evolving and each version brought many changes, it was easy to believe a whole dimension could be cancelled without much notice. The Aether was significant because it showed the community could believe in something without an official announcement, as long as it seemed possible within the game's logic. Minecraft has always encouraged this belief, as it never felt completely closed and always seemed like something could be hidden. But maybe the main reason the Aether stuck so strongly in the community's mind wasn't just because the mod was beautiful or well made, it was because there was more concrete basis for the theory. In the old Minecraft code, there were already references to the so-called sky dimension, as well as loose mentions of heaven and alternate world, which weren't just inventions from conspiracy forums, they were real records forgotten inside the game's files. Adding to that, the fact that Notch himself had publicly commented on the idea of adding a celestial dimension in the future, imagination did the rest. It wasn't an official announcement or a firm promise, but it wasn't pure speculation either. It was an offhand comment that lingered in the community, ready to spark theories later. At the time, several YouTubers like Resende, Tasercraft, and Van Extreme played this mod for many episodes, often saying things like, "One day this should be in the game," or "One day Mojang will adopt it." So we all started to believe it, almost like a Mandela effect. And the strangest thing of all is that this idea never dies, because recently news came out that Aether 2 would be released. Yes, even before GTA 6, more than 10 years later, we got the Aether mod 2, and if we look at the mods page, we'll see that there are new blocks, new mobs, new dungeons, new weapons. In short, the community's imagination never stopped. So what exactly was this so-called sky dimension? Even before the end, there were plans for a world above the clouds with floating islands and an atmosphere opposite to the chaotic underground Nether. The idea was to create a kind of elevated counterpart, an open, bright, and celestial space. When the end was released in beta 1.9 with its islands floating in the void, many people felt that familiar strangeness. It wasn't the sky they imagined, but it wasn't ordinary either. The theory quickly emerged that the end was the adapted or simplified version of that sky dimension, which was never completed. And well, at this point I think it's no secret to anyone that Minecraft has a series of unfinished ideas that never made it off the drawing board. From gears that would be a kind of vertical redstone to several forgotten mobs over the years, the Aether, or the so-called sky dimension, was just one more of the ideas forgotten by Mojang. But getting back to the topic of the video, the so-called phantom dimension, it didn't just become popular so quickly because of the Aether, but also because it was very reminiscent of the far Firelands. Who remembers those mysterious structures that were at the supposed end of the Minecraft world, about 12 million blocks from spawn? An absurd distance that practically no one could reach by playing normally, and when someone finally got there, the scenery was completely different from anything we had known up to that point. I remember that in 2020 there was a foreign YouTuber whose goal was to walk from spawn all the way to the far Firelands in vanilla mode, no mods, no cheats, nothing, and he had already been doing this for many years. I made several videos on the topic, each getting over 1 million views, since people were curious how something so strange could exist in such a familiar game. Many theories came up that it was the boundary between dimensions, or that maybe beyond that wall there was something even darker, some kind of secret activation. Well, personally my favorite theory is that the Firelands separate each player's world, so behind them there's the automatic house, and behind another one there's Ven Extreme's Mock Raid series, behind another there's Resende's Paradise series, so in the end we're all connected. But not to ruin our childhoods, the real explanation was simply mathematical and much less interesting. The algorithm that generated the terrain used noise calculations based on very large numbers, and when the player got too far from the starting point, these numbers started to lose precision because of floating point limitations. The terrain could no longer organize properly, resulting in vertical, distorted formations that looked like they were from another game. Yes, my friends lied to us, Minecraft isn't infinite, and even knowing that today, it's hard to deny the visual impact that caused. The Firelands didn't seem like a glitch, they looked like Minecraft showing the seams of its own universe. For a community already theorizing about hidden portals and secret dimensions, it felt like the end of the world, or perhaps the start of something new. Beyond the Firelands and the Aether, there was something else that really fueled this idea of a hidden world, the so-called void, or what many people call null, or simply emptiness. This wasn't an official dimension or anything announced, but resulted from old bugs placing players in odd situations, especially in unstable game versions. Sometimes the player would just spawn in complete emptiness. It wasn't the normal void from the end, it was a space with no visual reference, no inventory working properly, no ambient sound, no mobs, nothing interacting around. This still occasionally happens, especially on online servers during connection setup. The resemblance to some states of the Phantom Dimension is striking, as both involve incomplete loading and loss of the world's internal reference. But back then, no one had a clear explanation for it, so creativity came into play. Stories began to emerge that there was such a zero world, a place where the game threw corrupted data or broken worlds. The idea was that when something went wrong, Minecraft would send you to this invisible layer that wasn't part of the normal dimensions. This became fuel for creepypastas, horror videos, and theories that mixed mixed the game with the supernatural. Officially, there was never a separate Zero world. What actually existed were loading errors, synchronization failures, and bugs. But it's much more fun to believe in a conspiracy theory in a new and unique feeling, just like the Phantom Dimension. If you haven't considered Herobrine yet, you're just crazy. This is easily the most consistent theory in the game's history, maybe even in all of gaming. What started with an edited image and reports on the forum is simply the most absurd lie that everyone still thinks is true to this day. Super Lazao, what do you mean Herobrine doesn't exist? Yeah, sorry to ruin your childhood. And by the way, she never loved you either, so let's hit the gym. But to be fair, Herobrine really is a complex story. It's a ghost mob that watches you from the shadows, that only appears after hours and hours playing on hardcore, that makes subtle changes in your world that could be connected to any little event you can't explain, like a random forest fire. And for years, Mojang themselves put the phrase Herobrine removed in the game's update notes as an inside joke, but it always left people wondering. And maybe in the most recent versions, the closest thing we have to that is the ancient city, often linked to a dimension of Arden. If you've explored it, you might notice a deactivated portal on the wall. We don't know what it represents, but it adds mysticism and keeps bringing the player into the same loop. There's a theory, there's a haunting, a dimension that we still don't know about. In the end, the cool thing is that Minecraft has always left room to imagine that there's something beyond. A game built with blocks but never limited us. Share your theories below, subscribe, and follow me on Instagram @Amin77.